There comes a point in your walk with Christ when you stop looking at others and you start looking towards yourself, when you start examining yourself. In today's video, I want to talk about judgment. The Bible tells us many times to judge righteously. Now, how do you do that? Well, the first thing that I want to tell you is you need to judge yourself first. Matthew 7, verses 1 through 5 says, "Judge not, that you may not be judged. For with the judgment you pronounce, you will be judged, and with the measure you use it will be measured to you. Why do you see the speck that is in your brother's eye, but do not notice the log that is in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, 'Let me take the speck out of your own eye,' when there is a log in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye." Jesus stated in Matthew 7, 1-4, that we can't judge others unless we judge ourselves first. What does that mean? Look at your own actions before you look at the actions of others. You need to start seeing clearly the things that you're doing before you can see clearly the things that everybody else does. Because if you're judging others but not judging yourself, you become blind to self-judgment. You become blind to yourself. You can't see past yourself, meaning you're not going to be able to be transparent with yourself. I've had a glimpse of this actually, and it started to become more prominent in my life, or more noticeable in my life, when I started examining myself. That way I was able to see what other people actually had within them. And the biggest one that I started letting go of was pride. I had a lot of pride. And the more and more I started judging myself, the more and more I started examining myself and looking into my own heart, my own mind, my own thoughts, and my own actions, I was like, wow, Joe, you really had a lot of pride. I really did have a lot of pride, especially when somebody told me about something when I was wrong. I refused to accept that I was wrong. Even though I was wrong, I would always try to find a way to right that wrong or to justify the wrongdoing, which isn't right. It's pride, it's arrogance, and we know that's not the way of love. So I started looking into myself and seeing that pride that I actually had within myself. And the moment I started to do that, it started to become more of a habit. I started to examine myself more. When I started thinking to myself, okay, you think like this, right? But then what about this? In one case, I work at the movie theaters, and when I'm cleaning out the theaters, I look at the theaters, I take a good look at the theaters, the ones that are messy more specifically, and I say, bro, these people really don't know how to clean up after themselves, like, wow. But then I take a deep look at myself, and I'm like, you know what? That can be you. Especially when your mother or father is telling you to pick up after yourself and you're not doing that. So it took for me to let go of that pride, not just to let it go and look at myself or to examine myself, but it also took submitting to God. I had to give that to God. I had to tell him, Father, I give this to you. I know it's something that I struggle with, and I openly admit that to you. And I give that to you, and I cast that burden, that sin that I struggle with, I give it to your shoulders. And I gave it to Jesus. And the more and more I started doing this, the more and more I started to see myself more clearly. My old self, that pride, that anger, that lust that I was still holding on to. And some of it that I still do hold on to. And I started examining myself. I started taking a deep look into what I was doing, my actions, the thought process that I had in doing so. So then when I started looking into my pride, I started to notice pride in others a lot more visually, a lot more clearly. By their actions, I started to see their pride, their mindset, their thoughts towards things. Some people who aren't able to admit that they're right, or it could even be anger. The more and more I started to look at my own anger, there are some people that I see. It may be friends, it may be family, anybody. Some people just let the anger get the best of them, and that was me. And that can be me at times, and it's something that I'm working on, because I know that's not one of the fruits of the spirits. One of the fruits of the spirits is actually self-control. And the Bible in Proverbs says a man without self-control is like a broken down wall without, it's a city broken into and left without walls. So basically self-control, a lack of self-control can be chaotic. But I started looking into these things. I also started to look into myself at lust, and I started to notice what lust does to a person. The thoughts, the mindset that it changes. It changes and shifts your thoughts, your mindsets. So what Jesus said, before you try to remove the speck out of your brother's eye or your brother's or sister's eye, you need to first remove the log that's in your eye, so that when you remove that log that's in your eye, you can remove the speck that's in their eye. You need to judge yourself before you judge others. You need to look at yourself before you look at others. But I also want to talk about judging righteously. How do you judge righteously? It's not about the outward appearance. It's about inwardly, the actions that a person commits, and that also can have an inward effect. Sin also comes from the internal action, that internal thought, that desire that leads you to commit the action. Yes, sin is also that action committed through the flesh, but it's also the mindset, that knowing of sin, that knowing of what you're doing is that sin, that mindset that strays from God. But I want to talk about judging righteously. And John 7:24 says it perfectly. It says, "Do not judge by appearance, but judge with right judgment." What does it mean? You don't judge somebody based off of their appearance, because first and foremost, everybody is different. I have different facial features than you. You have different facial features than me. We're different. People wear different clothing. People can express themselves, especially all the designer and fashion and clothes that we have nowadays. People can express themselves. Yes, there are certain clothings that maybe people shouldn't wear, especially out in public. But the truth is, people have free will. But the point is, we shouldn't judge each other based off of appearance. Not just by face, by body, by clothes, by hair. We need to judge somebody based off of their actions. But before we could judge somebody based off of their actions, we need to look at our own actions before we can judge them based off of their actions. And again, when you start to look at yourself based off of your sins, you start to see other people for their sins. Like pride for pride, lust for lust, greed for greed. And you'll start seeing that more profoundly in other people when you start to look at yourself. You need to be honest with yourself. You need to be humble with yourself. You need sometimes to even just sit down and examine yourself, examine your mind, examine your thoughts. Especially if you talk about people who lust outwardly, you need to look at yourself when you lust inwardly. And that's something that I definitely have come through, to and fro with struggles, something that I've struggled with a lot. I see many people talking about this and that. They want to, this and that. But I think to myself, how many times do you lust for a woman in your mind? How many times may you lust for a person in your mind? Look at yourself before you look at them. And again, it's not just about looking at yourself. It's also about looking to God. You need to submit to God. You need to give these desires, those thoughts, you need to give that to God and tell him, Father, I do struggle with this, and I'm trying my best to, look at myself. Help me to examine myself, my thoughts, my mind, my actions, so that I can judge myself before I start judging others. Before I learn to judge others, let me learn to judge myself first. Jesus also said that judgment will come back to you. And that is where that judgment of the self comes into play. When you judge others based off of what they do, God is going to judge you based off of what you do. And if you judge somebody based off of a certain measure, God is going to bring that certain measure back to you. And again, it's through test. God needs to test you, but it's also to humble you, discipline you, and to turn you towards obedience instead of resentment. God does it for a purpose. But that was my video today. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you did learn something from this today. And remember, before you judge others, judge yourself. God bless you all. Thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you all so much for your support. I love you all, and I hope you have an amazing rest of your day.